The morning sunlight carried a touch of warmth, easing the remnants of last night's nightmare. Still haunted by questions, I gathered my thoughts and asked the old boatman the first thing that came to mind. "Why didn't you wake me at midnight?" He didn't look at me. His eyes were locked on the sea. His voice was low and slow, as if weighing every word. "In these waters," he said, "there's an old tale that something called a sea devil whispers to sleepers around midnight. If you hear it say your name, you'll walk into the sea." I didn't argue. Not because I believed in ghosts, but because I'd learned to view such things from a scientific lens. 3 in the morning is when human body temperature drops. The ocean is damp, cold, low in oxygen. Having a nightmare in that state? Hardly unusual. And those who walk into the sea? I chalked it up to sleepwalking, or substances. But when I asked about the island ahead, the one surrounded by reefs, whirlpools and mermaid folklore, the old man fell silent for a long time. Just as I thought he wouldn't answer, he finally spoke again. This time his voice was colder, like the sea breeze before dawn. "The whirlpools and reefs are real," he said, "and the rocks out there contain a strange metal. It scrambles sonar. Maps never match reality. Because of the magnetic interference, most vessels avoid this stretch of water." I thought that was the end of it, but after a moment he continued. "Still, fish are plentiful all year round, regardless of storms or currents. I know villages in the south, they sell cheap. I bring it back, resell. There and back, not even 2 days." I frowned. A dangerous sea that everyone avoids. And yet he profits safely and quickly? Why don't others come here? No traders, no larger boats? I looked around. The sea was calm. But aside from this boat, nothing. The old man said no more. And just then a black speck appeared on the horizon, growing, clearer. An island began to rise before my eyes, much larger than I expected. Why isn't this place on any map? Well, this is going to be a hell of a story. As the boat neared the shallows, the younger sailor dragged out a worn inflatable raft. He shot me a mocking look. "2 days from now, at dawn, I'll be back right here. Otherwise, see you next month." I nodded, memorizing the time and location. It wasn't exactly uninhabited, but if I got stranded here for a month, this turned into a survival show real quick. I stepped onto the raft, forcing myself not to think about it sinking. Cautiously, I paddled toward the beach. It took a while to get the rhythm, but eventually the raft moved forward and I closed in on the island. The moment I landed, I frowned. The sea here had a strange stench, not at all like Hawaii's waters. Scattered along the shore was a pale grey coral reef. At first I thought it was debris washed in by the tide, but looking closely, it kept its full shape, lying flat like a submerged reef newly risen. I prodded it with my paddle. The outer layer crumbled like rotted mud. A faint green mist rose, foul and sour. It smelled like gas, or something decomposing. I quickly covered my nose. Nearby, the only thing that seemed alive was a mass of black seaweed, wet, breathing, and shaped exactly like a human head, covered in drenched hair. I pulled the raft into a patch of tall grass and gasped for air. The heat and humidity were suffocating. And immediately, another problem surfaced. No phone signal. Compass spinning like crazy. I laughed. Classic, just like those cheap horror flicks I used to mock. Though it was still early, I decided to head toward the southern village as soon as possible. The old boatman had mentioned the southern village was less hostile to outsiders than the one up north. But my plan to follow the shoreline quickly fell apart. A cliff blocked the path with no way around. I had no choice but to turn inland, into the dense tropical forest lining the island. Dark, damp, and unnaturally silent. I stayed near the sea, hoping to spot signs of people soon. But even by noon, I saw nothing. Just scattered broken stones in the forest. Looking closely, they weren't natural. They used to be man-made structures, but now, buried or eroded until no one could tell. After a quick bite, I walked for nearly 2 more hours, my feet aching. Then a narrow path appeared, winding down from the hills. I followed it, fast, and finally, a village. I walked slowly, observing everything. The houses were built mostly of wood, with roofs made of corrugated metal or palm leaves. Some had damp clay floors, with patched walls showing signs of age and repair. The villagers watched me with wary eyes. But I'm a journalist, and our greatest skill is having thick skin. I tried greeting people, starting small talk, but they either pretended not to hear or turned away like I was invisible. Everyone wore simple clothes. Some had faded shirts, others wrapped in sarongs. A quiet modesty, with a hint of distance. As I fumbled for a better approach, a loud voice rang out. I turned and saw a tall, dark-skinned young man in a life vest striding toward me with a scowl. Outsiders like you aren't welcome here. Get out of this village, don't mess with our lives. I opened my mouth to respond, but then I noticed the others around us. They said nothing, but their eyes were cold, heavy, like stones. If I backed down now, my whole story would sink into the ocean. I tried to explain that I only wanted to interview to learn that I meant no harm, but the more I spoke, the angrier he got. Shut up! His fist came straight at my face. In that instant, I didn't think. I just saw the fist grow bigger before my eyes, and my body moved on its own. I grabbed his wrist and almost instinctively threw him to the ground. I had no idea how, but the motion was so smooth, so automatic, that even I was stunned, and that made everything worse. A few more young men rushed in, holding long, sharp fishing spears. I didn't wait another second. I turned and ran. Footsteps and shouting followed close behind. I had only one option: run up the mountain. I glanced back while sprinting. They looked furious and worse. They weren't giving up. I pushed my body to the limit. But after today, I was already exhausted. In minutes, my vision blurred, and still the footsteps behind me wouldn't stop. They had chased me into the mountains, just as I thought there was nothing left to do. A woman's voice called out, not loud, but enough for me to hear through the wind and my thunderous heartbeat. This time, it wasn't a dream. I ran toward the voice through a tangle of jungle and saw an old woman. She had her back to me, said nothing, but a slight glance and a subtle gesture as if to say, follow. It was shady, but between her and a mob with spears, I picked her. Are we there yet? I gasped, half serious, half begging. We followed a narrow mountain path. The villagers had lost our trail. Both sides were lined with mossy rock walls, slick with vines and mildew. The forest floor felt thick and spongy, each step like sinking into raw flesh. The old woman didn't reply. Worse, she picked up the pace. I checked my watch. 3 p.m. In the distance, across the sea's horizon, a black cloud spread like spilled ink. I grit my teeth and kept going. Today has been nothing but climbing, running, or fleeing. I prided myself on my stamina, but now I was close to collapse. Finally, pushing through tall grass, I saw it. A flat clearing near the mountain's peak. The ground was lined with stone slabs, carved with strange markings. Most were covered in green moss, but under it, patterns swirled like coiled rope or fossilized tentacles. Not far from the stones stood a 2-story wooden house built right into the cliff face, but still alive. You outsiders. The woman spoke, still with her back turned. Why do you keep coming to this island? Her voice was unsettlingly calm. No anger, no surprise, just a question, as if she'd asked it many times before. She turned around, and I froze for a second. She was older than I'd thought. Tall, thin, hair white as dried seaweed, tangled like it had never been brushed. Her robe, hand-woven, patterned like rusted anchor chains. Her eyes were deep hollows, not blind, but not looking at me. Looking through me, at something standing behind me, though nothing was there. I tried to stand straight, to look professional, but gave up. I collapsed onto the stone floor like wet trash. I introduced myself, explained why I was here, and thanked her for helping me. She didn't say her name, but told me if I needed to call her, just say, the Boatmaker. Strange name. But ever since I set foot on this island, strange had become normal. Raindrops began to fall. The black cloud had arrived, draping the sky over the island. Apparently, people here preferred action over words. The boatmaker glanced at me once, then turned and walked into the house. Of course, I followed her inside. The moment I stepped through the threshold, I felt like I had entered the cabin of an ancient ship. The air smelled of firewood smoke, dried seaweed, and old books. By instinct, my eyes scanned the room. The walls were covered in model ships, the kind real estate agents use as decoration, but these were finely crafted. None of them had sails. Nearby was a large map, not a printed one, but a hand-drawn sketch of the island. Several areas were circled with notes scribbled in an almost unreadable hand. Arrows marked ocean currents, whirlpools and reefs. A rack held iron hooks, coiled ropes, and enormous rusted fishing spears, still sharp, big enough to catch a whale or something bigger. Below them sat a workbench, parchment, notebooks, quill pens, and strings of seashells dangling from a lamp. The only light source was a dull orange bulb hanging from the ceiling, too weak to chase away the shadows creeping in every corner. Lightning split the sky. The boatmaker's shadow flickered across the wall, as if it were trembling. She moved in silence, lighting candles one by one. With each flame, the room felt more like the lower deck of a 16th century ship, where ancient prayers still clung to the air. She sat in a wooden chair beside a cast-iron fireplace. Burning wood crackled beside her. She said nothing, just stared out the window. The window faced the sea. From this height, you could see almost the entire northern coast. I spotted the beach where I had first landed. She must have seen me from the very beginning. I was about to ask something when a man's voice rose behind me. "Young man, you just stepped on my hand." I jumped and looked down. An older man lay buried under piles of books, notes, and a laptop. I stumbled backward, apologizing. He waved it off and stood, taller than the boatmaker, thin, tall, sharp-nosed, hair wild, like someone who had lived in a library too long. He wore a wrinkled shirt layered with a crumpled khaki jacket. Pens and a notebook peeked from his pocket, filled with writing that looked Latin, but wasn't. He adjusted his glasses, glanced up at the flickering ceiling bulb, and sighed. "Sis, the young man and I are starving. Got anything to eat?" The boatmaker didn't respond. She simply walked upstairs. Floorboards creaked, then a door clicked shut, ending the conversation. We looked at each other and laughed awkwardly. My stomach growled. Luckily, I'd brought canned food. We each had one. I introduced myself, explained why I came to the island. The man nodded, seemed friendly enough. He talked quite a bit. "Call me Professor Vane, Tikanoa Vane from Miskatonic University. My field, ancient languages and spiritual geology." Just hearing that made my head spin. But if he knew anything about this island, my next article might be more than just clickbait. When I asked about his research, he squinted toward the now pitch-black window. Candlelight stretched his shadow across the wall, long like tentacles. "Tomorrow," he said, "I'll tell you some interesting things. But for now, I need to get back to my thesis." Outside, the rain was pounding. I finished eating and slumped into a wooden chair near the fire. I meant to nap, just a little, and then I heard drums. Faint but echoing, steady. Sometimes they rose above even the thunder. Drums from the south side of the island. Professor Vane looked up, his brows furrowed. He didn't say a word, but I could tell. He knew exactly what those drums meant.